Dr. Amira Hassan had been briefed extensively on Valnari physiology during her preparation for the diplomatic mission, but no amount of academic study could have prepared her for the reality of meeting Ambassador Kira Chantel in person. The conference room aboard Harmony's Edge fell silent as the Valnari delegation entered, their reptilian grace and alien dignity commanding respect despite, or perhaps because of, how dramatically they differed from human physical norms. Kira moved with fluid precision that made every gesture seem choreographed, her elongated limbs carrying her tall frame with the kind of effortless elegance that belonged in classical art rather than diplomatic meetings. Her scaled skin caught the artificial lighting in ways that created subtle rainbows across surfaces that shifted from deep emerald to warm gold depending on angle and illumination. Most striking were her eyes. Vertical pupils that seemed to glow with inner light, their color changing from amber to brilliant green as her emotional state fluctuated during the formal introductions. Dr. Hassan, Kira said as they were introduced, her voice carrying harmonics that made human speech sound almost musical, I understand you will be coordinating the medical exchange programs between our species. Your research in regenerative therapy has gained considerable attention among Valnari healers. Amira found herself momentarily speechless, not because of linguistic barriers or diplomatic protocol, but because she was struggling to process the impact of Kira's physical presence. The ambassador was unlike anything she had ever encountered, yet undeniably magnificent in ways that challenged every assumption she'd held about beauty and attraction. The honor is mine, Ambassador, Amira replied, hoping her professional composure masked the fascination she felt while studying Kira's features. Valnari longevity research has applications that could revolutionize human medicine. I'm eager to learn from your people's approaches to healing and biological maintenance. The formal pleasantries continued around them, but Amira found her attention repeatedly drawn to details that academic briefings had mentioned but couldn't adequately describe. The way Kira's scale pattern seemed to pulse gently with her heartbeat, the graceful length of her neck that allowed for surprisingly expressive head movements, the intelligence that shone through eyes that were alien but unmistakably alive with curiosity and warmth. Your species' approach to medical intervention is quite different from ours, Kira observed during a pause in the larger diplomatic discussion. Humans seem to favor rapid, aggressive treatments, while Valnari healing emphasizes patience and biological harmony. The combination of both philosophies could produce remarkable advances. Amira nodded, though she was having difficulty focusing on the technical discussion when she kept being distracted by the way Kira's eyes shifted from green to gold when she became enthusiastic about scientific topics. Cultural exchange often reveals that different approaches to the same problems can be complementary rather than contradictory. Indeed, Kira agreed with satisfaction that made her scales shimmer slightly brighter. Though I confess some concern about whether the physical differences between our species might create barriers to effective collaboration. The comment was delivered with diplomatic neutrality, but Amira detected an undertone that suggested personal uncertainty rather than simply professional concern. She found herself studying Kira's expression more carefully, noting subtle signs of self-consciousness that seemed at odds with the ambassador's obvious competence and intelligence. I don't see physical differences as barriers, Amira replied with gentle certainty that she hoped would address whatever insecurity she was detecting. I see them as fascinating variations that suggest new possibilities for understanding biology and consciousness. Kira's eyes flickered from gold back to deep green, apparently processing Amira's response for meanings that went beyond simple diplomatic courtesy. You find Valnari physiology interesting rather than disturbing? The question revealed more vulnerability than Amira would have expected from a high-ranking diplomat, suggesting that Kira's concerns about species differences were more personal than professional. I find it remarkable, Amira said with honesty that surprised her with its directness. The scale patterns, the way your eyes express emotion through color changes, the grace of your movements, it's unlike anything I've ever encountered, but certainly not disturbing. Unlike, Kira repeated thoughtfully, her tone suggesting that she was interpreting the word as confirmation of alienness rather than appreciation of uniqueness. Unlike in the most wonderful way, Amira clarified, recognizing that her attempt at reassurance might have had the opposite effect. Different doesn't mean less beautiful, it means there are forms of beauty I never knew existed until I met you. The words escaped before Amira could consider their diplomatic appropriateness or professional implications. The formal conference room suddenly felt too public for the kind of personal admission she had just made, while Kira's expression shifted through several configurations that suggested complex emotional processing. "You consider Velnari physiology beautiful?" Kira asked with careful precision, apparently trying to determine whether Amira's compliment represented genuine aesthetic appreciation or diplomatic politeness. "I consider you beautiful," Amira replied with quiet intensity that made the distinction clear, her professional composure giving way to honest attraction that transcended species barriers and conventional aesthetic categories. Kira's scales seemed to brighten considerably at the personal nature of Amira's response, while her eyes cycled through color changes that suggested emotions too complex for simple interpretation. The formal diplomatic context made it impossible to continue such personal discussion, but something fundamental had shifted in their interaction. As the official meeting concluded and various species began separating into working groups for specific collaborative projects, Amira found herself hoping that her assignment to medical exchange programs would provide opportunities for continued conversation with someone who had challenged her understanding of beauty, attraction, and the possibilities that emerged when beings from different worlds chose to see each other clearly rather than through the filters of cultural expectation or species specific bias. "Dr. Hassan," Kira said as the formal session ended, her voice carrying warmth that suggested their personal exchange had affected her as profoundly as it had Amira, "I look forward to our collaboration on the healing research projects. Perhaps we might begin tomorrow with detailed discussion of regenerative techniques." "I would like that very much," Amira replied, though her tone implied that she was looking forward to more than just technical discussions with someone whose alien beauty had captivated her completely during their first meeting. As the Velnari delegation departed for their quarters and the human staff began organizing materials for the next day's work sessions, Amira realized that her academic preparation for first contact had failed to account for the most important variable, the possibility that profound attraction could transcend every biological and cultural difference when someone encountered a being whose unique beauty challenged everything they thought they understood about desire and connection. The medical exchange laboratory became the setting for daily collaboration between Amira and Kira that extended far beyond their official research objectives, though both maintained careful professional boundaries that masked the growing personal interest underlying their technical discussions. Amira found herself looking forward to their morning sessions with anticipation that had little to do with regenerative therapy protocols and everything to do with Kira's presence, the way she moved with fluid precision while handling delicate instruments, the subtle color changes in her eyes when she encountered intriguing data, the musical quality of her voice when she explained Velnari healing philosophies. Human tissue regeneration appears to follow linear patterns, Kira observed while reviewing cellular analysis results, her scales catching the laboratory's bright lighting in ways that created shifting patterns of emerald and gold across her arms. Velnari regeneration operates through spiral configurations that rebuild damaged areas more efficiently but require significantly longer time periods. Amira nodded while trying to focus on the scientific implications rather than the fascinating way Kira's eye color shifted toward brilliant amber when she became excited about research discoveries. The combination of approaches might allow for rapid initial healing followed by comprehensive regenerative reconstruction. Speed and thoroughness working together instead of being mutually exclusive. Precisely, Kira agreed with enthusiasm that made her entire bearing brighten with intellectual satisfaction. Neither species approach alone achieves optimal results, but integrated techniques could surpass anything either has developed independently. Their research discussions gradually expanded to include personal stories that provided cultural context for their different approaches to medicine and healing. Amira learned that Kira came from a family of philosophers and artists rather than scientists, her interest in medical research developing from personal experience with healing practices that emphasized patience and harmony over rapid intervention. "My grandmother was a pattern keeper," Kira explained during one of their afternoon conversations, her voice carrying the reverence that marked discussions of respected elders. She could read the scale patterns of illness and health, determining treatment approaches based on biological rhythms that most modern Velnari have forgotten how to perceive. "Pattern keeping sounds similar to diagnostic intuition," Amira replied with genuine interest in cultural practices that combine scientific observation with traditional wisdom. Human healers sometimes develop instinctive understanding of patient needs that goes beyond textbook knowledge. Kira's expression shifted to what Amira was learning to recognize as contemplation mixed with uncertainty. Grandmother always said my patterns were too vibrant, too changeable for proper pattern-keeping work. Traditional Velnari aesthetics favor subtle scale configurations and stable coloration that indicate emotional control and spiritual balance. The comment revealed an insecurity that surprised Amira, as she had been consistently impressed by what Kira considered flaws in her appearance. Too vibrant, she asked with confusion that reflected genuine inability to understand such criticism. Velnari beauty standards emphasize restraint and consistency, Kira explained with matter-of-fact tone that didn't quite hide underlying sensitivity about the topic. My scale patterns are considered excessive, my eye color changes too dramatic, my movements too fluid for traditional aesthetic preferences. I've never conformed to proper Velnari appearance standards. Amira found herself staring openly at Kira as she processed this revelation, trying to understand how anyone could view such remarkable beauty as inadequate or excessive. Kira, everything you just described as flaws, the vibrant patterns, the expressive eyes, the graceful movements, those are exactly the qualities that make you so. She paused, searching for words that could convey her perspective without crossing professional boundaries. So alien? Kira suggested with resigned acceptance that indicated she had learned to expect such reactions from other species. So captivating, Amira finished firmly, her professional composure giving way to honest appreciation that she could no longer suppress. Every time your eyes change color, every time the light catches your scale patterns differently, every time you move with that incredible grace, I find myself completely mesmerized by beauty I never knew existed. Kira's scales seemed to brighten considerably at Amira's words, while her eyes cycled through configurations that suggested complex emotional processing. You're being kind, she said quietly, though her tone indicated she wanted to believe the compliment was genuine rather than diplomatic courtesy. I'm being honest, Amira corrected with gentle insistence. Whatever Velnari beauty standards might say about vibrant patterns or expressive coloration, from a human perspective, you're absolutely stunning. The fact that you don't conform to your species' aesthetic preferences doesn't make you less beautiful, it makes you unique in the most wonderful way. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of other research team members, forcing them to return to technical discussions despite the personal territory they had begun exploring. But Amira noticed that Kira's movement seemed more confident for the remainder of their work session, as though her perspective on her own appearance was beginning to shift based on feedback from someone who saw her through completely different cultural and aesthetic frameworks. Over the following days, their interactions began incorporating more personal elements alongside professional collaboration. Kira shared stories about her homeworld's artistic traditions and family expectations, while Amira described her own journey through medical training and the personal experiences that had shaped her approach to healing and patient care. Human social customs seem much more physically demonstrative than Velnari traditions, Kira observed during one of their conversations, her tone carrying curiosity mixed with something that might have been wistfulness. Your crew members touch each other casually, express emotions through facial expressions and body language in ways that my species would consider inappropriate or overwhelming. Physical affection is how humans often show care and connection, Amira explained, noting how Kira watched human interactions with the careful attention of someone trying to understand social patterns that differed dramatically from her own cultural background. Though we also respect boundaries and individual preferences about contact and personal space. Velnari maintain formal distances even with close family members, Kira replied with explanation that revealed how isolated her species' social customs might leave individuals who craved more intimate connection. Emotional expression is considered private, personal matters that should be controlled rather than displayed openly. Amira found herself studying Kira's expression, recognizing longing for the kind of casual warmth and physical affection that characterized human relationships. Would you like to experience more demonstrative social customs? She asked carefully, uncertain about appropriate cultural boundaries but wanting to offer comfort to someone who seemed to be yearning for connection that her own species' traditions didn't typically provide. Kira's eyes shifted to brilliant amber as she processed the implications of Amira's question. I've wondered what it would feel like to be touched with affection rather than formality, she admitted with vulnerability that suggested she had never voiced such desires before. But physical differences between our species would probably make such contact awkward or unpleasant for humans. The assumption revealed how deeply Kira's insecurity about her appearance had affected her self-perception, leading her to believe that her reptilian characteristics would make physical affection unwelcome or uncomfortable for beings with different biological backgrounds. "May I?" Amira asked gently, extending her hand toward Kira's arm with invitation rather than assumption, recognizing that this moment would either deepen their connection or reveal incompatibilities that could complicate their relationship. When Kira nodded permission, Amira's fingers made contact with scaled skin that was warm and surprisingly soft despite its alien texture. The scales created patterns under her touch that were unlike anything she had experienced, but far from unpleasant. The sensation was fascinating, beautiful in its uniqueness, and profoundly intimate in ways that transcended species differences. "How does that feel?" Amira asked softly, noting how Kira's eyes had brightened to a color she had never seen before, deeper than amber, warmer than gold, suggesting emotions too complex for simple description. Like being seen, Kira replied with wonder that indicated the simple touch had provided something she had been missing throughout her life. "Like being valued for what I am instead of criticized for what I'm not." As they stood together in the laboratory, surrounded by the scientific equipment that had brought them together, Amira realized that their research partnership was developing into something far more significant than professional collaboration. It was becoming a bridge between worlds that proved connection could transcend every biological and cultural difference when built on mutual respect, genuine appreciation, and the courage to see beauty where others might notice only strangeness. The breakthrough in their relationship came during what should have been a routine evening when Amira returned to the medical bay to retrieve research files she'd forgotten, only to discover Kira standing before one of the polished metal surfaces that served as mirrors, examining her reflection with the kind of critical intensity that suggested painful self-assessment rather than casual grooming. Kira hadn't noticed Amira's arrival, allowing the human to observe a moment of private vulnerability that revealed the depth of insecurity that had been hidden beneath diplomatic composure and professional competence. The Velnari ambassador traced her fingers along her scale patterns with movements that conveyed dissatisfaction rather than appreciation, her eyes cycling through color changes that reflected internal conflict about her own appearance. "I'm not pretty like humans," Kira whispered to her reflection, her voice barely audible but carrying enough pain to make Amira's chest tighten with sympathetic anguish for someone she had come to care about deeply. The words revealed how profoundly Kira had internalized human beauty standards despite her own species' aesthetic preferences, comparing herself to physiological norms that had never been designed to accommodate reptilian grace and elegance. She continued her critical self-examination, apparently cataloging every way her appearance differed from the mammalian softness and symmetry that characterized human attractiveness. Amira stood frozen in the doorway, recognizing that she had witnessed something intensely private while simultaneously understanding that Kira's self-perception was so fundamentally wrong that remaining silent would be a form of cruelty. The woman she was watching criticize herself was the same person who had captivated Amira completely from their first meeting, whose alien beauty had challenged every assumption about attraction and desire. "Kira," Amira said softly, her voice carrying gentle authority that made the Velnari turn with surprise and embarrassment at being discovered during such a vulnerable moment. "Amira," Kira replied with composed dignity that didn't quite mask her mortification at being observed while engaging in self-criticism. "I didn't realize anyone else was working late. I was just checking my appearance for tomorrow's presentations." The polite deflection might have been believable if Amira hadn't heard the whispered self-criticism, but the pain in those words had been too genuine to dismiss as casual grooming concerns. "You're not pretty like humans," Amira repeated quietly, stepping closer while maintaining non-threatening body language that invited conversation rather than demanding it. "That's what you said." Kira's scales seemed to dim slightly as she realized her private moment had been witnessed, her eyes shifting to deep green configurations that Amira had learned indicated shame or distress. "It's simply an objective observation," she replied with attempted clinical detachment. "Different species have different aesthetic standards, and I clearly don't conform to human preferences." You're absolutely right, Amira said with quiet certainty that made Kira look up in surprise at the unexpected agreement. You're not pretty like humans. The confirmation seemed to hit Kira with visible impact, her scales losing more of their luminescence as her worst fears about her appearance appeared to be validated by someone whose opinion had become important to her. You're not pretty like humans, Amira continued, moving close enough that her presence filled Kira's personal space with warmth and proximity that contradicted the apparent cruelty of her words, because human pretty is ordinary compared to what you are. Kira's eyes widened as she processed the unexpected direction of Amira's statement, her automatic assumptions about the conversation being challenged by meanings she hadn't anticipated. Human pretty is symmetrical and predictable and safe, Amira continued, her voice carrying conviction that grew stronger with each word. You're not any of those things. You're extraordinary. You're magnificent. You're so far beyond anything human beauty standards could measure that comparing you to human pretty would be like comparing starlight to candle flame. Amira, Kira whispered, her scales beginning to brighten as hope warred with years of accumulated insecurity about her appearance. Every time I look at you, I see beauty that takes my breath away, Amira said with honesty that transcended diplomatic courtesy or cultural sensitivity. The way your scales catch light and create patterns that change like living art. The intelligence and emotion that flow through your eyes like liquid gold and emerald. The grace that makes every movement seem choreographed by someone who understands that beauty isn't about conforming to expected standards, it's about being so uniquely yourself that other people can't help but stare in wonder. Kira's reflection in the polished metal surface showed scales that were now glowing with soft radiance, her eyes cycling through color configurations that suggested emotions too complex for simple interpretation. You really see me that way? I see you exactly as you are, Amira replied, reaching out to touch Kira's arm with the same gentle contact that had proven successful during their previous physical interaction. Someone so beautiful that human pretty seems like a pale imitation of what real beauty can be when it's not restricted by narrow cultural definitions. But the physical differences, Kira began, apparently still struggling to believe that her reptilian characteristics could be genuinely attractive to a mammalian species. Make you more beautiful, not less, Amira interrupted with firm conviction. Different doesn't mean worse, it means there are forms of beauty in the universe that I never knew existed until I met you. And now that I've seen you, really seen you, human standards seem limited and boring compared to the incredible diversity of ways that beings can be magnificent. Kira turned away from her reflection to face Amira directly, her eyes bright with emotions that transformed her already striking features into something that seemed almost luminous with hope and growing self-acceptance. I've spent my entire life being told I was too vibrant, too expressive, too different from proper Velnari aesthetic standards, Kira said with vulnerability that revealed how deeply appearance-related criticism had affected her self-perception. And then when I encountered humans, I assumed that meant I would be even less acceptable to species with completely different ideas about beauty. You assumed wrong, Amira said with gentle certainty, her hand moving from Kira's arm to cup her face with touch that was tender rather than clinical, appreciative rather than merely curious. You're not less acceptable, you're more beautiful than anything I ever imagined beauty could be. As they stood together in the medical bay's sterile lighting, surrounded by the scientific equipment that had brought them together, Kira's scales glowed with soft radiance that seemed to emanate from internal joy rather than external illumination, while her eyes shifted to colors that Amira had never seen before, deeper and more brilliant than any previous configurations. Amira, Kira said with wonder that encompassed both gratitude and growing understanding that her appearance might be an asset rather than a liability in building connections with beings who could appreciate diversity rather than demanding conformity. Yes. Amira replied, though her tone suggested she already knew what Kira wanted to express. When you look at me like that, Kira said with a smile that transformed her alien features into something radiant with confidence and growing self-acceptance, I finally understand what it means to feel beautiful. The admission hung between them like a gift, revealing how profoundly their connection had affected not just their professional partnership but their individual journeys toward understanding that beauty existed in infinite forms throughout the universe. waiting to be recognized and appreciated by beings brave enough to see beyond their own cultural programming to celebrate the magnificent diversity of ways that different species could embody grace, intelligence, and stunning visual appeal. 6 months after the pivotal conversation in the medical bay that transformed Kira's understanding of her own beauty, Dr. Amira Hassan and Ambassador Kira Chantel stood before the Interspecies Medical Council presenting research that had emerged from their collaboration, discoveries that proved as groundbreaking scientifically as their relationship had been personally. Kira moved with the confident grace that had always marked her bearing, but now her scales glowed with the inner radiance of someone who had learned to see herself through appreciative eyes rather than critical cultural standards. The integration of human rapid intervention techniques with Velnari regenerative harmony has produced healing protocols that surpass anything either species achieved independently, Amira reported to the assembled medical professionals from dozens of different worlds, her presentation highlighting advances that had grown from the partnership that began with mutual scientific curiosity and evolved into something far more profound. Kira stepped forward with fluid precision that showcased the alien elegance Amira had first found captivating, her scales creating shifting patterns of emerald and gold as she addressed the diverse audience with confidence that reflected her personal growth as much as her professional expertise. The key breakthrough involved recognizing that diversity of approach strengthens rather than complicates medical intervention, Kira explained, her eyes shifting to the brilliant amber configurations that indicated intellectual excitement. When different physiological perspectives combine through respectful collaboration, the resulting techniques address healing challenges that single-species approaches cannot resolve. The medical advances were impressive. Regenerative therapies that worked across species barriers, diagnostic techniques that accommodated diverse biological systems, treatment protocols that respected both efficiency and harmony in healing processes. But Commander Torres, observing from the audience, recognized that their greatest achievement had been personal rather than professional. Their research partnership has become a model for successful interspecies cooperation throughout the diplomatic mission, she noted in her official report. Other mixed-species teams have gained confidence in their own collaborative potential by observing the success that emerged when Dr. Hassan and Ambassador Chantel chose to celebrate their differences rather than attempting to minimize them. The presentation concluded with enthusiastic approval from medical professionals who recognized innovations that would transform healing practices throughout the galaxy, but Amira and Kira's greatest satisfaction came from seeing how their relationship had inspired others to explore connections they had previously dismissed as impossible due to physiological or cultural differences. Dr. Torres and Engineer Velken have announced their engagement, Kira mentioned with satisfaction as they reviewed the positive responses to their joint research presentation. They said our example helped them understand that compatibility wasn't about similarity, it was about appreciation for qualities that made each partner unique and valuable. Amira smiled, remembering her initial assumptions about beauty and attraction before meeting someone who challenged every preconception she'd held about what could capture her heart and imagination. How do you feel about serving as inspiration for other interspecies couples? Honored, Kira replied with the warm glow that had replaced her former insecurity about her appearance, and grateful that our connection has helped others recognize possibilities they might not have explored otherwise. Their personal relationship had grown alongside their professional partnership, developing into a love story that celebrated rather than overlooked the differences that had initially seemed like barriers to connection. Kira's scales had become a language of emotion that Amira had learned to read like poetry, while her color-changing eyes provided constant visual confirmation of feelings that transcended any need for verbal expression. Any regrets about choosing a human partner despite the cultural complications? Amira asked, using the question that had become ritual between them as they navigated the journey from professional cooperation to romantic partnership to committed relationship. Only one, Kira replied with the smile that indicated her answer would combine humor with genuine reflection on their shared experience. What's that? I regret that it took me so long to understand what you meant when you said I wasn't pretty like humans, Kira said, her scales glowing with contentment that reflected not just happiness but profound self-acceptance that had grown from being loved for exactly who she was. I kept interpreting that as confirmation that I was inadequately beautiful instead of recognizing that you were telling me I was more beautiful than human standards could measure. Amira laughed, remembering Kira's initial devastation at what she'd intended as the highest possible compliment. Perfect timing, she assured her partner. Any sooner, and you wouldn't have been ready to believe it, and I wouldn't have understood how to explain that different doesn't mean less. It means there are forms of beauty in the universe that exceed anything familiar standards could anticipate or describe. As they prepared to return to their shared laboratory, now officially designated as the Interspecies Healing Research Center, Amira reflected on how her simple honest reaction to Kira's appearance had evolved into a relationship that was transforming medical practice throughout the galaxy while serving as proof that love recognizes no boundaries when built on genuine appreciation for another being's unique qualities. Same time tomorrow? Amira asked as they gathered research materials and prepared to continue work that had grown from individual projects into collaborative investigations that honored both human efficiency and Velnari wisdom. Tomorrow, and all the tomorrows after, Kira replied, her words carrying the weight of commitment that had grown from initial attraction into a partnership built on mutual respect, intellectual compatibility, and the kind of love that saw beauty where others might notice only difference. Through their laboratory's observation windows, they could see other mixed-species couples throughout the diplomatic mission pursuing relationships with confidence that had been inspired by witnessing how successfully differences could become advantages when appreciated rather than merely tolerated. In the distance, medical facilities throughout the galaxy were implementing healing protocols that had emerged from their collaboration, proving that the most important advances often came from partnerships that combined different perspectives rather than demanding uniformity of approach or appearance. Sometimes, Amira had learned, the most profound discoveries were personal rather than scientific. The recognition that beauty existed in infinite forms throughout the universe, waiting to be appreciated by beings brave enough to see past familiar standards to celebrate the magnificent diversity of ways that consciousness could inhabit physical form. And sometimes, she reflected as Kira's scales shimmered with the gentle radiance that had become her signature expression of contentment. The most important research involved learning that when someone takes the time to really see you, appreciate you exactly as you are, and tell you that your differences make you more rather than less beautiful, the confidence that creates becomes a beacon for others who are still learning to believe in their own magnificent uniqueness. The greatest breakthrough, Amira realized as she watched Kira work with the fluid precision that had first captivated her attention, wasn't in their healing protocols or regenerative therapies. It was in proving that love transcends every boundary when it's built on genuine appreciation for the incredible diversity of ways that beings can be beautiful, intelligent, and worthy of devotion that celebrates rather than seeks to change their most distinctive qualities. I have something to show you, Kira said with mysterious satisfaction as their work session concluded, leading Amira to a section of their laboratory that had been covered with privacy screens for the past week. Behind the screen stood a holographic display that showed hundreds of images, Kira in various poses and lighting conditions, her scales creating patterns of breathtaking beauty while her eyes cycled through the full spectrum of colors that had originally made her self-conscious but now served as visible proof of emotional honesty and expressive range. I've been documenting my own appearance, Kira explained with pride that would have been impossible during their early encounters, learning to see myself the way you see me. Every scale pattern, every color change, every aspect of my physiology that I once considered flawed. Amira studied the images with wonder, recognizing her partner's journey from self-criticism to self-appreciation through visual evidence of beauty that had always existed but required loving eyes to help it be recognized and celebrated. And what do you see when you look at these images? Amira asked gently. I see someone magnificent, Kira replied with confidence that transformed her already striking features into something luminous with self-acceptance. Someone whose differences make her extraordinary rather than inadequate. Someone beautiful enough to capture the heart of the most wonderful human in the galaxy. The declaration was accompanied by scales that glowed with radiance that seemed to emanate from joy rather than external lighting, while her eyes shifted to colors that Amira had learned indicated the deepest forms of contentment and love. Same time tomorrow? Kira asked with the ritual question that had anchored their relationship from professional collaboration to romantic partnership. Tomorrow, and all the tomorrows after, Amira replied, her words carrying promises that had grown from initial attraction into a love story that proved beauty comes in infinite forms throughout the universe, each one perfect in its own unique way when appreciated by someone who understands that the most stunning sights are often the ones that challenge everything we thought we knew about what could take our breath away. Around them, Their laboratory hummed with equipment that facilitated healing across species barriers, while beyond their walls, other beings were discovering that love recognizes no boundaries when built on the courage to see clearly, appreciate honestly, and celebrate the magnificent diversity of ways that consciousness can inhabit form, proving that sometimes the most beautiful response to, "I'm not pretty like humans," is the patient insistence that human pretty could never begin to capture the extraordinary beauty that emerges when someone learns to be proud of exactly what makes them different, distinctive, and absolutely dazzling in ways that familiar standards never could have imagined or described.